For me now, it's eyes on, hands off. I was the third female dragon. So we ended up pivoting and being strategically agile, and we probably sold just under 1 million COVID tests.
So nice to have you all here because we are so lucky to have the incredible Chanelle McCoy join us here in the workspace. She's everything that you would aspire to be in terms of business, in terms of goals, in terms of what you think you might like to try and aspire to. It's such a privilege to have you here, and really genuinely, you know, we're a tiny little startup, and to have someone of your caliber here talking to our members is really amazing. So thank you for coming.
You are so welcome. I'm so proud to be here. I feel like it's like so really cool Soho house or something here. I mean, the interior, everything, and it's amazing workplace.
Let's get to you, because everybody's come here to hear about you. You have managed to juggle an extraordinary career and a family. Let's go back to where it started.
So I am one of 5 children from a small town in Galway on the west coast of Ireland. And as my mom often reminds me, Chanelle, you were the only one of the 5 kids I never took to the Beauty Baby show because you were so ugly. So we always have it, like a good laugh about it. But anyway, sorry, just throwing in a bit of Irish humour there. But my parents had a pharmaceutical company. When we were kids, my dad was a vet and basically saw an opportunity for veterinary products in Ireland and set up kind of a wholesale veterinary distribution company, then went on to develop generic veterinary products, which is basically kind of copycat veterinary products. So as kids, you know,
So is that when basically patents run out?
Yeah, so, you know, when you develop a product, you have a patent protected for maybe 20 years, and then just when the patent expires, you bring out the generic kind of copycat drug. So, you know, so as kids growing up in that environment, kind of the business environment, watching my parents scale the business, and, you know, we had to earn our pocket money and sweep the warehouse on a Saturday and, you know, pack parcels and get them shipped out. So there was always kind of that work ethic when we were younger. And I always wanted to work in the family pharmaceutical business. So when I finished college, I studied marketing and finance, and I went off then, worked as a sales rep for a pharmaceutical company here in the UK called Wyeth, you know, just to carry the bag and know what it's like to be a sales rep and get all the knockbacks.
How important do you think that time for you was? Because, you know, if you look at your CV, you could go, oh, well, she waltzed into the family company. That's an easy path. How important was that time outside of the family company for you?
Really important, because I wanted to come back to the business, but I wanted to come back with credibility and not just, you know, you're coming back to the business because you're a family member. And I remember actually going to work after I left Wyeth, before I came back to the family business. I went to work for a consultancy company in London. And the leader, my manager there, it was such a negative environment. It was so, I suppose, quite toxic. I remember going into the tube in the mornings and I'd be so nervous going into work, because it was all very much a leader who was, you know, trying to catch you out. It was all the blame culture, no positivity in there. And
is that a woman or a man?
That was a man. But actually, it really stands to you sometimes when you work in an environment where you don't have a good leader, because you then realise how important it is for you as a leader to be inspiring, to be motivating, to be self-aware of your behaviour, to not be that negative person, because us as leaders, we create the environment in the office, we create the culture. You know, when we come in and our mood is not good, you know, then that affects everyone. So when I came back to the family business, there were things I learned a lot working outside, like wanting to be an inspirational leader, you know, like having a good environment, having a good culture. So I came back to the business, and I wanted to set up a human side of the business, because it was veterinary and I wanted to do human pharmaceuticals. And at the time, there was, people would say, well, you had your infrastructure there in terms of your finance and your production facility, but we had no sales, we had no customers. So I remember looking at France was kind of the first market that I really wanted to target, because it was the biggest kind of copycat pharmaceutical market that we had. And Ireland wasn't very much, you know, it was a small market, 4 million people. And I remember looking at the list of all the pharmaceutical kind of potentials that I wanted to target in France and contacting them all. And of course, like, couldn't get a meeting at all. You know, who was this little company in the west of Ireland? But I remember getting on a plane and going to Paris, and I had my, you know, list. I mean, this is before like sat navs or anything. And I went to a lot of those offices, gave my card to the receptionist and said, can I see Christophe or Francois? And they were like, well, no, you don't have an appointment. But I sat in those reception areas for hours because I thought that person has to walk past me, leaving the office. And even if I can get 30 seconds with them, there's a chance that they will let me come back tomorrow and actually pitch my product and my ideas to them. And a lot of the time that worked because, and you'd see them coming out, and obviously the receptionist would be like, oh my God, this crazy Irish girl is still here, can somebody come and see her? But I probably wouldn't get away with it now. It's probably like corporate stalking. But what it taught me was absolute persistence, that when you believe in a product and a business that you have or a service, you will do that. You will persist because you know that if you can get in front of the potential customer, that they will potentially buy from you. So I spent, maybe 18 years in the family pharmaceutical business, in the medical side of the business, and built the medical. We got into 96 markets and we got maybe over 2,500 pharmaceutical products licenses granted in those markets. So, and that was all, kind of persistence and hard work, but I loved it.
Do you think that, we talk a lot within all of us here about the influence of women, about the change of women in within business. And for me, I've very much poo-pooed that in terms of my profession and felt that it's really made no odds whatsoever. For you, sitting in those pharmaceuticals as a young, very attractive, sorry, don't care what your mother says, woman, do you feel you worked that to your advantage, or did you come up against hurdles, or was that, again, for you just not a thing?
I think every industry is different, and I think it is industry specific how women are treated, because I'm very lucky being in the pharmaceutical industry. We are treated very well. There's absolutely no discrimination in terms of pay or how people respect you, or but different industries. And I would say to young girls as they're coming up through the ranks, pick an industry that are you resilient enough to be in banking, or do you want to go into an industry where women are more respected? And actually, any of the problems I ever had up along was actually from women, other women, and not from men. And I don't think people maybe say that too much, because it's the women who maybe resent you for being okay at your job, or or they may see you as a threat, so, and I, look, we all have bad days and stuff, and I'm very conscious, being a girl or a woman, really being kind to the junior women coming up, even though they are could be smarter and sharper than you, it's great, let's...
I'd 100% agree, and it's funny, I work really hard within my industry to mentor women coming up, and, super ambitious, brilliant young women underneath me, but there's nothing more hideous than to see them as a threat, and it's ridiculous. You have your time, you learn so much. It's about sharing, but that is not always the case. And a lot of people have said to me, "Oh, but hang on, isn't she going to take your job?" Yeah, probably at some point. And quite rightly, because she should. So let's arm her to be the best she can be.
And that's why, actually, interestingly, even just from a practical point of view, for any of you who are leaders or running teams, or maybe not even leaders, but you're in teams, that I noticed along the years as we were scaling the business, that actually weak managers hire weak people, because weak managers, they're very threatened. That just made me think, they're very threatened about the next person coming up through the ranks. Are they going to be better than me? Are they going to take my job? So it's very important in business to be aware of some of those managers that you may have in your team who are weak, and how they're recruiting, so it was...
In terms of scale, when you talk about just so we understand a little bit more, the family business that you were in for 18 years, how many people by the time you left?
Yeah, so I left the business 8 years before they sold it. I left it because I knew my parents weren't going to pass it on to the next generation. They were going to sell it. So I wanted to set up my own business then. But when I left it, we had 600 people
600?
Yeah, we were...
all in the west of Ireland?
All in the west of Ireland, in a little town. We were the largest indigenous pharmaceutical company in Ireland. Because obviously you do have a lot of big pharma companies there, like GSK and Pfizer, because in Ireland you only have 12% business tax, like corporation tax. So we had a lot of the IT and pharmaceutical companies there. Yeah. So so then I decided, you know, when I knew the company was being sold and I wasn't going to be at the helm, you know, I was never, my dad was going to be either carried out in a box or it was going to be sold. And I was, at the time, I was really curious about a molecule or a product called CBD. So some of you will be familiar with it from the cannabis plant. And the cannabis plant has lots of components in it. The two most famous components are THC, which is the addictive psychoactive part, which, you know, marijuana, you get your high. And the other famous component is CBD. So that is non-addictive, non-psychoactive. You will not get a high, you will not feel drowsy. And even they give it to children very high doses for severe epilepsy, you know, so that would kind of tell you that it's not psychoactive. But I looked at this product when I was working in the family business to maybe develop it as a medicine. Anyway, we decided then, anyway, I took it out, set up my own business about 8 years ago with a business partner. And I'm lucky she's a pharmacologist, she's a master's in biomedical science, master's in law. So she's all the kind of the science part, whereas I'm more the business kind of marketing strategy part. So
just quickly, in terms of advice, so if we've got guys here setting up, how important is that chemistry and synergy in terms of business partner and who you choose? And, you know, that is a massive decision, isn't it?
It is, yeah, because really it's about what you both bring to the table, you know, and really you need kind of different expertise. You know, she has her area, I have my area, then we obviously come together. You know, so I think the different expertise is really important, and then knowing where the gaps are. You know, okay, we have a gap maybe in marketing, or we have a gap in branding, or, you know, and you fill them then in other ways with people. I think the biggest thing I've learned is you have to have respect for your business partner, because there will always be times where you need to bounce ideas off each other. You know, what do you think? What should we do about this? Or we need to make this decision. And when your business partner gives their opinion, you have to want to listen and respect it and value it, because if you don't, it's just not going to work. So that respect thing is really important. And I think you both have to have same work ethics. You know, we're both nearly workaholics and kind of, well, not as bad now, but we were. Yeah, so it's really important, because if that breaks down, you know, you've got big issues with shares to be split and how you exit the business.
So wasn't something you necessarily had to go and look for, because the two of you organically came together?
Yeah, she worked in Chanelle in the family business, you know, so when I was leaving, I took her with me, because we worked really well together previously. Yeah, you know. So
you'd done 18 years in the family business, but a big deal to go on your own.
Yeah, it was. And, you know, I mean, at the time as well, I did the TV show Dragon's Den. I was a dragon on the Irish Dragon's Den for a while. I kind of won the award for Irish Businesswoman Leader in 2018. So I kind of thought, like, okay, I've kind of, you know, maybe proved myself a little bit. And then I thought, okay, now I'm going out on my own. What if I fail? What if the business is not successful? You know, then you feel, you know, you're worried. It's a risk.
How important was it, that thing? It's really interesting to pick up on the idea of proving yourself. How much did you feel you had to? Is that a driver for you?
Yeah, definitely. And I think even when I joined the family business first, that was what drove me, was the fear of failure. Because, you know, I was going back to the business in Galway. I was setting up the human side of the business. I didn't want to fail. I had to convince my parents to let me do this. And so you just will work, and you will plan, and you will get your goals. You know, that you'll just stay so focused on, you know, what do I need to do to be successful? What sales do I need? Go get it. You know, if I'm failing, plan B. So fear of failure, absolutely, I think it's driven me all the time. So
do you think that's stronger? I keep banging on about women, which is really weird, because that's not a thing for me. But do you think that's stronger in us as women? Do you think do you think we have that imposter syndrome? I have it like on a ridiculous scale, but the imposter syndrome that we're like, hang on, do you think they know that the shepherd's pie was burnt last night and my car's full of dog known? Like, do you think they can see through this facade?
I think, I think like it's like someone gave me an example before that if there's a woman reading a job advert, right, they will read the job advert and they will start to pick out all the things they can't do. I'm not sure I'm really good at that or that. Or whereas when a guy reads a job advert, which I think is great, they will just look at everything they can do. Yeah, great, I'm going to apply for that. I'm like slam dunk. But this is the mindset. So we probably as women, think, oh, we might fail, so we got to, whereas a man probably will go into the business, set up a business maybe with a lot more confidence and a lot less fear maybe of failure, I don't know, or look at it differently. And it's just, we are different, we think of things differently,
But that obviously often works in our favour.
Yeah, and that's why, when people say, are women better CEOs or men better CEOs or whatever, I just think men need women in companies and women need men in companies because we have a brilliant blended, mindset and we bring different things, so yeah, it's important to both.
So, but you and your business partner, obviously both really strong, capable women. With the CBD, you were way ahead of the curve when you were talking about 2018 to where we are now.
Yeah, and it's so basically we decided to develop a product that didn't come from the cannabis plant. We decided to have it lab made. So the word synthetic, which I know has negative connotations, but what that means is it's pure. There's nothing else in it, no traces of THC. If I told you 99% of vitamin C on the market today is synthetic, it's made in a lab because it means it's pure, So it doesn't mean it's bad. It's a good thing. It's a positive thing. So that was what we wanted to do because we wanted to develop a product that, yes, it was a food supplement and you don't need a prescription. You can just go in and take it as a supplement. People buy CBD for kind of stress, irritability, anxiety. Or they buy it for sleep, even though it's not a sedative. But the reason we can't sleep is because we have busy heads. So it calms your head and takes the anxiety out of your head. And then also CBD is a powerful anti-inflammatory. So it will reduce the inflammation, which will reduce the pain. And they're kind of the three main areas as a food supplement. So we wanted to go down the lab-made route because ultimately we want to bring the product as a medicine at a higher dose. And we have air traffic controllers that take our product, we've pilots, we've police, because they'll never fail a drug test because we're so pure. So it was interesting. So when we spent maybe 4 or 5 years doing clinical trials, safety clinical trials before we launched the product because we wanted to make sure it was absolutely safe for every organ. And we were just about to launch and we'd spent so much money on our clinical trials and bloody COVID hit, and we were like, so this is like where I'd say to you about strategic agility, right? So suddenly the plan is not going to plan in business. And it's not, just saying the fundamentals, we all potentially experience this. It's like, what do you do? Because at the time, pharmacists weren't taking any more products, retailers weren't taking any products. They were just focusing on what was the bread and the milk and whatever we needed. And I remember at the time in the business, it was a major cash issue and we were literally running out of cash and we were going to go bust. And we just couldn't get our product in anywhere. And then building the website side of it as well, was really slow. So we ended up pivoting and being strategically agile and selling COVID tests.
Literally. I literally rang you and was like, I need to get my family to somewhere. And this box of COVID tests arrived because you were the COVID test dealer. It was unbelievable.
It was just, we were able to find the COVID tests that, were really good. Because being in pharmaceuticals, you know the kind of the network and stuff. And we went and we found them, we got them validated in Oxford, and we probably sold just under 1 million COVID tests. Oh, wow. Privately to people. So lots of people could have Christmas dinners together. We sold them to factories, to meat factories or egg factories or so look, that was probably just by chance. That wasn't in the plan, but what I'm saying to you there, for me, I learned that when things are not going well, you've got to really think outside the box and look for any opportunity and go for it. So that really saved our business actually. And then we ended up coming out of the back of COVID, we got our product listed. Then we're in over 2,000 pharmacies in the UK. And the UK is a hard market for something like CBD, because there's a lot of rogue products on the market, or a lot of products maybe that are not legislated. So we decided then, to really scale the business, because ultimately it's probably like anybody here that has a business, the exit, you would love to maybe sell the business in the future, bank a few quid to kind of, so we looked at the Middle East, and we thought, you know what, let's go to Saudi. Saudi is the strictest market. They don't even permit alcohol. There is no CBD anywhere in the Middle East. And if we can crack the Saudi market, because Saudi are like the leaders in the Middle East, everybody follows what Saudi do in terms of medicine or food supplements. And we persisted for about 14 months. This is only in the last 14 months, going over and back to Saudi, over to the medicine agency. And they were like, absolutely no, we're not permitting the cannabis plant. We don't even allow alcohol in here. This is marijuana. And we're like, no, it's not marijuana. And I remember we got 8 no's. 8 times I went over to Riyadh, 8 no's. And I thought, you know what? These girls just don't understand the science behind it. We're synthetic, we're lab made.
And you're dealing with girls?
It was really interesting. The 3 decision makers were 3 women.
Really?
Yeah. So you see that now a lot, because they're so smart. They've gone off. They've maybe gone to America. They've become pharmacists. They've come back. They're really. So anyway, eventually, only 2 weeks ago, actually, we got permission to launch in Saudi. Wow. So we're the first CBD to be permitted. We'll probably end up launching in the summer. Why do you think there was the change? Because they eventually understood that we're not from the cannabis plant. We don't have THC. We're not addictive. And that we are lab made, so really they had no reason to reject the product. And we had a lot of clinical trials done that they wanted. And it was just lovely then getting that piece of paper from them and being able to then go to the UAE and Iraq and Yemen and all the other markets and say, right, Saudi have opened the doors to this product, and now they're like, okay, great, we're good to go. Wow. So that's, but again, I always say to the kids, just don't take no for an answer. If you believe in something and it was different if I was from the cannabis plant and I did have THC, there was no way we were going to get in, because they just don't permit that, and you have to respect the laws. But yeah, so that's kind of our recent achievement, which we're really happy about, that we'll be the first in the Middle East.
So it's 4 years since COVID. Mm-hmm. So you're basically 4 years into your... Is it 4 years or is it 5 years? We lose track of any time to do it.
Yeah.
Is it 5 now? Is it 5? Oh my God. Wow. So 5 years since COVID. Where would you say your business is now? I mean, obviously, massive milestone with Saudi. What other licenses are you looking at trying to achieve?
So we were the first brand in the UK to get safety approval by the UK government, which is great. We obviously now have the Middle East. We're probably Japan and Pakistan now are the next markets. But and I think what Caroline and I have learned is, you have to work out as a founder what you're good at and what you're not good at, and what level do you take your business to before you either need to hand it on or maybe not. Maybe you want to keep it at a certain size and just nurse it then and tighten up your costs and drive up your profit maybe. But for us, we knew that we were good at navigating the regulatory landscapes. We were good at doing clinical trials. That was our background. We were all B2B. We had never...
Business to business, I only learned that's what I'm...
Sorry, business to business. So Caroline and I, in our previous life working in the pharmaceutical business in Galway, it was all business to business. We had never developed a brand, we'd never launched a brand on the market, and we'd never done all marketing, social media, all of that stuff, branding, marketing that you need to, which we call B2C, business to consumer. But actually, funny, the only other time I was in Dorset, I went to see a lovely man called Professor Jeffrey Guy. I don't know if any of you have heard of this man. So he is the most incredible man. He was the man that basically, he was a doctor, and he developed a medicine using the cannabis plant, right? So when he developed it for epilepsy for children, for severe, these are kids with really severe epilepsy, maybe 20 or 30 convulsions a day. And he spent 20 years and 700 million bringing this product to market, doing all the clinical trials, getting all the licenses all over the world. And he got it to a certain stage where he got all of the licenses. His company was loss-making. It's all in his book, right? Completely non-profit. They had barely any cash left. And they sold the business to a big pharmaceutical company for $7.3 billion. Like, unbelievable man.
But then he bought it back.
But no, he didn't. He
then
Jeffrey
got
Guy.
for opiates.
Oh,
He
right,
bought
okay.
it back.
Okay.
And then he got the license for opiates in medicine.
Oh,
and then he
yes.
sold it again.
Sold it again. Oh my God. I mean, so I remember.
Is he single?
And he bred and he bred honeysuckle that won the Champion Hill, just say.
Yeah. Great. And his daughter does a lot of show jumping. So I remember reading this book called A Worthwhile Medicine. And I remember, because he was always for me like the hero in the CBD space, and how did this man do it? And he got so many knockbacks. And at the time, we had got a lot of knockbacks. You know, we got all our no's from the Middle East. We had Europe, you know, we're saying no to our clinical trials, and still nobody has a license in Europe. And I really was at a bit of a loss, you know, and I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to contact this man. I mean, I don't know him from Adam, but I'm going to tell him what I've done in the CBD space. So I tracked down his email address through a charity, told him everything. And what a lovely man. He came back to me and he said to me, come and have lunch with me, bring your business partner down. And we sat with him for 4 hours, and he was so generous with his time. And we basically left there having a new strategy. Fog was cleared, and yeah. So anyway, that's why.
But interesting that you understood. You know, it seems to be a theme throughout. Is that know your weaknesses, reach out, ask, look for the person that you believe has the answers. Don't be scared to go there.
Yeah, and I think maybe back when we were, I'm nearly 50 now, so my generation back when I was, 21, 22 in business, mentors weren't a thing. We didn't really, I suppose, we weren't told to reach out and find a mentor or be given a mentor. And I think now it's great. You have these, communities and these business communities and women and young people and, young entrepreneurs and everything. And I would say for anybody, just keep reaching out to people and keep asking for help, because now anybody that reaches out to me within reason, I've been there where they are, maybe at the startup. So
did you enjoy that role on the Dragon's Den show?
I absolutely fascinated. And I remember someone asked me before, they were like, what's the best piece of business advice you were ever given? And it reminds me of a pitch when we were doing Dragon's Den. So it was funny. So the setup with Dragon's Den is, it absolutely is your own money, right? Even though the money's sitting on the table, that's actually not the real money. It's like, and Sony Music own the rights to Dragon's Den, and they have Dragon's Den in about 27 countries. And actually the year I did it in Ireland, the first year I did it, I was the third female dragon. So they had 3 female dragons and 2 male dragons on it. And we used to go in and record it maybe in about all the pitches in maybe 2 or 3 weeks. And you would have probably 7 pitches a day. And you had no prior knowledge of the pitch. So, in between every pitch, you were taken out of the room was set up, new products came in. And literally you'd sit in the chair, and the first time you saw the product was when maybe they take off the blanket or whatever over it. So you had no time to Google, nothing. Now, the pitches do go on for probably an hour and a half, and you would probably only see 10 minutes, because it is your own money. You've got to make a decision right there and then, and you've loads of questions that you want to ask. But anyway, so I remember this young guy came into the den one time to pitch, and he was maybe about 22, and he was so nervous. And he had developed an algorithm for the gaming industry, and it honestly sounded like it was going to be the next big thing, right? And he was saying that he had 2 guys working for him. These 2 guys, one of them had left Facebook, one of them had left PayPal. They believed in this algorithm so much. This is going to be groundbreaking. And I said to him, how much cash are you burning every month? How much does it take you to run your business every month? And he said $6,000 a month. And I said, well, I mean, how much money have you left? Like, when are you going to run out of money? And he said, I only have 3 months left. And he's like, I have been building this algorithm since I was 17 years old in my bedroom. We're like 5 years in, every single night building the algorithm. I have to close the company down in 3 months' time, and let the 2 people go. And when you're sitting there and you just sense the desperation, you just, from an emotional point of view, I'm thinking, oh, I just want to throw him a few quid. Like, that poor fella, he's been working. I mean, that's awful. And then suddenly you're like, no, you have to strip the emotion out of it. It's a business decision, you know. And so the advice that I was given before I went into the den was actually from Dermot Desmond, who was a really successful Irish entrepreneur who I happened to bump into one night at a dinner. And I said to him, Dermot, I'm going on Dragon's Den. Is there one piece of advice you'd give me? You know, because he owns Celtic Football Club and everything. And he said to me, never invest in a business you know nothing about, because you can't add value, you cannot challenge it, you know, you don't understand it. You know, and I remember sitting there and I thought, you know what, Chanelle, you don't know the first thing about gaming. You know, anything, you know, IT is not your area. You're not going to add value. You're not going to know if they're delivering or performing. So I didn't invest that day, and he didn't actually get investment, the poor guy. But
no.
Yeah.
Who did you invest in out of interest? Did you invest in anyone?
I invested in 5 companies.
Did you? And any of them come good?
One of them did, actually. It was a cotton bud with eye makeup remover in the cotton bud.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so it's in Boots and Primark and different places. But actually, yeah, I mean, it was such an interesting experience, and it was great to do it and great to be able to give, you know, the people a leg up. But it was interesting because sometimes a person would come in to pitch and you really like the person. You're thinking, oh my God, they're so smart. They know their stuff. I could so work with them. But the product they have is crap. I mean, just not a snowflake. And then you get people that come in and they have the most unbelievable product, and they are really quite obnoxious. And they're just, you just know, they know it all, and they're not going to take any advice, and you're thinking, I can't work with them. So it was a really interesting dynamic, trying to find someone that you thought, I really believe in your product, and I think you would be a great person to work with. Yeah.
Such an interesting experience, especially as you're having to put, I hadn't realised, I sort of imagined it was all a bit of a, you know, showboating, but you actually have to put your money on the line. So incredible success, and hopefully the 6 billion valuation is going to come through at the end of the year. And but incredible. But alongside that, you know, you've been juggling not only being a great daughter to your dad and supporting all of that, but also 2 babies, and you know, and also health issues with Archie. And how on earth do you do that? And you know, we look at you thinking it's all incredible, but how on earth have you managed to do that?
I mean, the one thing is you can't have it all. Like, that's for sure. And I think anybody who thinks they can, and that's why you shouldn't feel guilty for dropping the ball in different areas of your life, you know. And I think, I mean, when I was working in the family business, and we bought that business into 96 markets, I probably went to nearly all of those markets, like even Iraq and Kuwait at different times. And Eve is 17 now, but when she was born, I went back to work maybe after a month. And I travelled every single week. You know, I left home on a Monday morning or a Sunday night, and I came back on a Friday. And I remember when she was 6, and I had a nanny, you know, obviously, because, you know, when you're working, you need that support at home. And I remember Eve said to me, she said, Mummy, I love you, but I love Soph more. And Soph was our nanny. And I thought to myself, oh my God, that's awful. And then I thought, you know what, Chanelle, that's not her fault, because actually, from a time point of view, she sees her nanny more than she sees you. And I think that was a wake-up call for me to think, okay, you need to cool the jets, because I was obsessed with the business. I was obsessed about getting into the next market. I was obsessed about the goals and the P&L and making the money, and, you know, and proving, and I loved it. But then you think there's a price to pay. So I decided, right, I need to get a better work-life balance, you know, and I think for me, you know, how do you get that? Because it is really hard. And I just started to apply maybe my business principles to my personal life, you know. So in business, I was very organised, and I was good at communication, I was good at prioritising, but actually at home, really I wasn't, you know. So I started to be better at home, and, you know, as the kids say to me now, you know, sometimes, Mommy, turn off that bitch button before you come into the kitchen. You know, work's over. Don't speak to us like we work for you, Mommy. Don't. No, I do speak nicely to my staff, but I can be a bit assertive sometimes, you know, and you're like, whoa, and they're like, Mommy, you know. Anyway, but, you know, and I think what I learned as well is in your business, even not if you own a business, but even if you're managing a team or, you know, whatever, if you have 1 or 2 people under you, you think nobody can do it like you. You'll do a 10 out of 10, right? Because you know every inch of your job and your area. But actually, when you delegate, and if you can find somebody to delegate to and you trust them, and I know you'll probably say, well, I have a small business, I can't afford to hire somebody, but you can make it work, even small areas to delegate. They're not going to do a 10 out of 10, but they'll probably do it 8 out of 10. And actually 8 out of 10 is really good, because for me now it's eyes on, hands off. I keep an eye on the business, but I'm not in the weeds anymore. And 8 out of 10 is really good because it frees you up then to be a bit more strategic, to go after the big rocks, and so that it is about delegation, and it is being aware. And I think we have to be aware that, when we come home from work, how is our mood and our work ethic actually affecting the house, So I'm a lot more self-aware, and I suppose I've matured a lot.
It's very interesting though, isn't it? I remember going when Channel 4 lost the rights and ITV had the rights, and I went to this interview in ITV, and I went in, and for the first time after 20 years or whatever, I said, I'm a mother and a wife, but I really love working, and I really believe I can contribute to your team, but that's me. And I walked out going, you are absolutely insane, because the whole of the rest of my career I'd sort of created this idea that I was an island. I had no appendages. Of course, I could be there from 6 till 8 on a Sunday, a weekend, because that's what I did. Yeah. And I got the job, and it was just like this incredibly empowering moment where I was like, oh, so they actually see my value within the whole, not just having to pretend that you're this constant. But it takes time in your life as a professional woman, I think, to get to a point where you have the confidence to do that. And there are certain points that trigger your understanding of just what a broad person you need to be, isn't it, with all your kids. And when Archie was sick after being born. Yeah,
he ended up having heart surgery kind of 6 months when he was born, and that was quite serious. But definitely, and I just think I lived with a lot of guilt for a long time, and I'm not saying this as a mother. Dads, it's the same for dads, they're missing the school, they're missing the school plays, or they're really busy, or they're traveling abroad. And actually, you don't even have to have kids to feel guilty, because you can just, not have kids and be a really busy person, and you're maybe not being the best friend, or you're not being the best daughter, or you're just not giving time to people that need you in your life. So it's not isolated to having kids or being a mom or whatever. It's right across the board that we don't have a good work-life balance. And I think it's okay at certain times in your career and your life to not have the right balance, because there are certain times, particularly when you have your own business, it's shoulder to the wheel. It could be 6 months where you got absolutely work late at night to get stuff over the line, but then you need to recalibrate and have that better balance. But it just, we and it's a support network around us. It's our family, it's our friends, it's reaching out to communities, like this kind of, and speaking. I mean, I did a lot of networking, or went to a lot of events, because I just wanted to learn, like how do you balance things, or how do you manage your cash, or, these kind of things. So
I really feel like that, you're like a sponge, you're looking and learning and working out and what contributes to your path, which has been such a hugely successful one.
It just reminds me when you say sponge. So I was and actually just goes, but I just want to touch on leadership for a minute, because if you look now, I've always been fascinated by leadership and how to get the best out of people. Why do certain teams perform? Why do other teams not perform? And I not so long ago I read some science that's coming out of Harvard and Stanford about what is now the number one most important leadership trait, and it's actually empathy, right? Believe it or not, which is your ability to put yourself in other people's shoes as a manager or a leader, whatever. So, if people are coming into work and they normally are really good performers and they've dropped the ball and they've missed their sales targets for the last few months, what empathy doesn't look like is you bring that person into your office and you're like, listen, you got to buck up here. We got sales targets to hit and your performance is just not up to scratch. And, you've another few months now and we're going to have a serious talk if things don't improve. That's not empathy. You bring the person into the room. What is empathy is you've always been an amazing performer. you know, you've dropped the ball. Is everything okay at home? Is there anything that is happening in your life that's affecting your performance in work? Is there anything that we can do as a company, or I can do as your manager, to support you, to get you back to where we know you can be? That's empathy. It's about the person feeling, actually, my manager cares about me, not just about my output, they actually care about me. So I was horse racing actually in Cape Town in January. Randomly, a friend of mine was there, so I went with her. And I met this man at the races, you know, and I thought he was an elderly man. He looked probably mid-80s. And we were queuing up for food, and he had an Irish accent. And I said to him, God, I said, like, this gas, you know, I'm Irish and you're in Cape Town, and, you know, what about you, kind of. And he said, God, I don't really meet many Irish people. He said, where are you sitting? Sure, we'll sit down and we'll have a chat. And I was like, great. So anyway, he said, you know, I was born in the north of Ireland, and I'm Irish and very proud of it, and moved to Cape Town when I was 12 and went to college, and I was a really good rugby player. And he said, then I went and I worked for, working in social services. And he said, now when I say social service in Cape Town, I mean, you know, maybe somebody, has a child gone, I think, the daughter, like where a wife would ring saying, my husband has doused me in petrol, they're just about to set me alight. Like, he said, it was really hardcore stuff. And he said, I learned there a lot about understanding, about empathy, and about, you know, the shit that happens in people's lives that really can affect, you know, that they have to bring this to work, or they have to manage this. And I said, okay, and what did you do then? And he said, then I went on, he said, I got a job in Coca-Cola, and I was filling the lorries and driving the lorries and stuff. And he said, then after that, I just became global CEO of Coca-Cola. And I was like, what? Oh my God, I'm sitting with the global CEO. I said, how long were you global CEO for? He said, 40 years. I was like, I cannot believe a Paddy ran Coke for 40 years. And I was like, oh my God, that's unbelievable. And his name is Neville Estelle, right? I mean, the most humble, fascinating man. And I was like, oh my God, Neville. I said, I love leadership. I can't believe, like, you're like my total celebrity to be sitting here, you know, you being global CEO of Coca-Cola for 40 years. And I said to him, what made you a good leader? Why do you think you were so successful and you remained in Coke and you remained a CEO? And he said, empathy. And I was like, oh my God, Chanelle, don't interrupt him. Like, I was just overflow. I wanted to say to him, I read about, you know, empathy. And I was like, no, stop talking to him. And he said to me, you know, he said, because what I learned as a social worker all of those years back in Cape Town, understanding people's challenges and getting people to come with you, persuasive, you know, he said, I took that in to Coke, and that was my leadership style, and it was all empathy. Was really what I focused on. And I was like, you are so ahead of your time. You know, I mean, he retired probably when he was 60. So, I mean, or 70, I think he was, you know, so he was displaying empathy 40 years ago when all other leaders were command and control, micromanagers, how much can we get out of our people, wring them dry, you know, where he wasn't. And, you know, so I just, you know, and hence obviously why he is one of the best leaders in the world. Anyway, I know I digress, but that's just a little bit about empathy. No matter what you do, just have a bit of empathy. And we need it with our kids, and we need it at home. We need it with our friends and our family, because we like when people display empathy to us, you know. So your leadership advice is empathy. Your business advice as a takeaway is watch your cash. So cash is very different to profit. Okay, if you look at Amazon, when they were, you know, up through the years, not now because now they're very profitable, but they had loads of cash, but they were not profitable, right? And what you need when you start a business and you're scaling a business is you need cash flow. You need to be paying the bills, right? And that's not profit. You know, profit is, okay, like what's kind of left, or how profitable is your product maybe at the end of the day. And if you're in a great situation, if your first 4 years, it's all about survival and cash. You're not really banking that much profit at the end of the year, or ciphering off 100 or 200 grand kind of profit. You're plowing it back into the business. And what I learned is as you're growing a business and you want to scale and you want to set up buy another machine or open up another branch or something, growth sucks cash. And most people, when they go bust in business, they go bust during a growth period because they're pumping cash into the business. So I would just say to anybody, watch your cash, nearly more than your profit. Every single morning I come in, the first thing I do is I look at cash. The last thing I do before I log off is look at cash. I'm a bit obsessed with cash. Because, you're spending and suddenly it comes to the end of the month, you're like, shit, where did the cash go? I have to pay the salaries. So that's my tip about business.
And how many people are you employing now?
Now only 6. Now I had 500 or 600 people reporting into me. So when Caroline and I, this was and I would really recommend this, when we set up our business, we both said we want to be virtual. We want to outsource everything. We don't want to hire anybody because we want to do what we're good at. I'm a good sales girl. She's good at her clinical stuff. So we outsource finance. We would outsource HR, all our marketing, branding, social media, digital, regulatory. We outsource everything. And we just have the 6 of us in, If we weren't outsourcing, I don't know, maybe we could have maybe 50 people or something. Amazing. But it works well for us because we didn't want to be dealing with too much HR issues and stuff. But every business is different. That was just our model, that we wanted to go with. And that's okay because you don't have to be vain by, I have 100 people working for me. That's not virtual is really good because that overhead is not there. So you're not stuck with that overhead if they work for you.
And that comes back to cash.
Comes back to cash, yeah.
Well, I think we're going to have to. I know you've got to get back, but I think you'll all agree we are just so lucky to have Chanelle here. When I quietly put the text in, I thought there's no way she's going to have time. She's too fabulous. But anyway, she's made the time for us.
Anything for this girl. I love it.